It's time for The Story Behind the Person, featuring lively, in-depth conversation with compelling guests from our community. And here is our host, Jonathan van Bilsen.
Hello and welcome to this episode. My guest today is Terry Voss, owner and operator of Voss, your Independent Grocer. We'll learn all about issues facing the grocery industry with rising costs, high inflation, and coming out of a pandemic. We'll also get a glimpse into the life of Mr. Voss, his accomplishments, and his involvement in the community. We'll be right back after these messages.
Top care with top stylists. Book your next hair appointment with Port Perry's award-winning hair salon, Rosario Greco Styles. The hair experience you deserve. Book today. Call 905-985-0099.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, our guest today is Terry Voss. He owns the Independent Grocer in Port Perry, Ontario. Mr. Voss, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, I did a little bit of research on you. You've got an interesting life. You started up in Belleville area, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And grew up there, and I understand baseball was your passion.
Loved baseball.
Do you still play now?
No. The body doesn't form that game any longer.
I know the feeling. So you worked at Burger King as a youngster?
Yes, I started off at Burger King when I was a 15-year-old, and going through high school and college, I worked my way up to a swing manager.
Okay.
And I left there to join the restaurant business, which was Mother's Restaurant.
So I guess the food business, the food industry was always in your blood right from the get-go.
I love food.
So now the interesting thing about Mother's Pizza is, now you also at one point wanted to be an electrical engineer, right?
Yes, I went to college for 1 year. I was looking at electrical engineering. I did not enjoy it. It wasn't probably what I wanted to do. So one of the passions I did have was food, and I really enjoy being out there with the customers, talking to people, presenting food. I dabbled in a little bit of everything with the cooking and developing menus and the artistic work behind it. Right. So it's one of the things that I really enjoyed doing, and Mother's at the time was an up-and-coming chain, and I really enjoyed working there. For
those of you who don't know Mother's Pizza, I do remember it. It was one in Oshawa, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And they were great. They were large. They had pizza. They had spaghetti. They had everything Italian going for them. And it's also a place that you met your wife, I understand.
That is correct. I met my wife there. She was a waitress in the Peterborough location when I went there as a manager. Right. And that's where I met her.
And I thought that Mother's had a policy against staff dating each other.
Yes. So at one point, people got to notice that we were a little bit more than just casual friends. And I was brought up, asked if I was dating her, and I was. And I admitted to it, and I was asked to let her go. So I ended up terminating my wife from employment so we could continue to date.
And she was okay with that?
At the time, yes. I don't know if it would be right now she'd agree to it, but yes, then it was good.
Right. So there was never any issue of her staying and you leaving?
I'm not 100% sure. I think there was a little upset that I let her go and I didn't leave.
So now they were bought by Little Caesars, is that
Little
right?
Caesar, yeah. Illich, owner of Detroit at the time, bought the chain out. They end up changing all the stores over to Little Caesars. It was a new concept for them as a full-service restaurant. I believe they started with 40 some odd stores, and within 5 years, I think there was around 6 or 7 before they went just the complete Little Caesars you see today, which is just a takeout.
Right, but it's strictly pizza now, isn't it, or not?
Strictly pizza, yes.
I thought it was. And they moved you to Brockville, is that right?
To Belleville.
Okay. And then you ended up in the grocery business with Loeb, correct?
Yes, so I was, not to kind of brag, but I was really good at my business. Right. And everybody knew who Terry Voss was in the restaurant business.
As they do now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was approached by the owner of the Loeb store, and Loeb at the time was going to introduce a food program they called the Ready Wall. And they were looking for someone to manage the Belleville location. It was probably the third or fourth Loeb banner store that had this new food concept, way ahead of their time. And he hired me, and I decided to join. And I went and joined Loeb and I ran the prepared food program way back then when nobody else was doing it.
When you say prepared food, so this is if I want to have dinner, but I don't want to bother making it, I don't want to go to a restaurant, I can go in and buy prepared dinners.
Yeah, we had fried chicken,
okay,
pizzas, we had prepared salads. Things that you see in my store today, we did 20 years ago. Before anybody else did. Rotisserie chicken, everything. I mean, it was something that was very new. It was a brainstorm, which now you see a lot of stores have all these meals that you go in and you fill up plates and you pay for it. They were already there 20 years ago.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I know, I mean, rotisserie chicken is a staple in everybody's diet these days, but I didn't realize it started that long ago. So were you living in Peterborough and then you moved to Brockville? Is that how it worked, or were you commuting?
No, I was living in Peterborough, and then Christine and I got married. We were living in Peterborough. When she was going back she finished university, and she was going to go back to college, so she went to college at Loyalist, and I commuted back and forth to see my new wife.
Right.
So I ended up asking for a transfer to the Belleville location, so I moved back home to Belleville.
This is the one you fired, right?
This is the one I fired, yes. I fired her and then married her.
Yeah, I just want to be clear on that. And she is now the executive director for the Oak Ridges Hospice, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So you after you started in Belleville, continue with the prepared food business, you also had a couple of daughters in this whole process, right?
Yes, I did. We had Stephanie first, and then 3.5 later, we had Ashley.
Wow. I just want to jump ahead a bit because one of them lives in Italy and the other lives in Edmonton.
Correct.
And they've got, your grandchildren live with them, which is very unfair, right? Very unfair.
Correct.
So you go to Italy 7-8 times a year?
I wish. We try to go at least twice a year,
okay,
and they come home at least once or twice a year.
Right.
That's when we get to see our grandkids. And then the ones in Edmonton, we try to go out there 3 to 4 times a year, and they try to come home at least once a year.
Wow. Yeah. So is that going to be a long-term thing? Are they going to stay in Italy and Edmonton, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
The kids that are in Italy have sold their property in Toronto and now looking to find a permanent place in Italy, and they've been really working hard to get permanent jobs with their employers. And the ones in Edmonton are, Ashley's husband's a chiropractor, and he has a great practice right now in Edmonton. And
so that's permanent.
Yeah, and she got posted there with Canada Customs, so it's a permanent location. So yes, a lot of traveling for me in the future. So
once you retire, which I hope is many years from now, I would recommend, if you're going to buy a place, go with the Amalfi Coast instead of West Edmonton area, okay? Just from a weather perspective.
I'm agreeing with you on that one.
So you became produce manager after your prepared food end of the business,
yes.
Right? This is still with Loeb's?
Yeah, still with Loeb's. So what happened with the prepared food is they were very ahead of their time, and profits was not there for the company at the time, and Loeb at the time was a small company compared to what we see out there today. So what ended up happening was I got the opportunity to become a produce manager, and I did very well as a produce manager for a few years. Did a little bit of special work for the company. I would go out and do store audits. And then the opportunity came for me when Loeb got bought out by Provigo to become a store manager. So I took the 26-week course that they offered in London, Ontario. Spent 26 weeks in London, Ontario to do the store manager course. Did that with them, was successful, and I was placed in a Kingston store.
Okay.
And I worked between the Kingston stores for about 12 years. I also brought the Super C banner to Ontario. I helped set up the Belleville location for Super C, which is their discount store in Quebec.
And Provigo is Quebec, right?
Yeah.
Quebec-based.
Sorry, back up a little bit. Provigo had to sell some of their stores, and we got sold to Metro.
Oh, okay.
So at this time, it's now Metro.
Which was Dominion at one time.
Exactly.
Right? Going back, right.
Yes. Again, out of Quebec. So anyway, we end up flipping some stores over to the Metro stores, and I started doing some specialty work. And my friend from Brockville, he jumped ship years ago and went with National Grocers, which is the independent banner.
Right.
And he ended up convincing me to apply for a franchise. So I applied for a franchise. We did the interview, and we did the whole thing in one day. It was like a whirlwind.
Wow.
I think it was like 6.5 hours in Toronto. I went from finances to labor relations to the VP of the company at the time, Tim Staffen. And I leave not knowing what's going on. Then I get a phone call saying you're a successful candidate. and we have a store for you in Oshawa.
Wow.
So in 2005, we purchased our first location in King and Town Line Road, and that's where we became our first Voss Independent Grocers.
Because I always thought National Grocers was the old IGA back in the day, but I guess I'm wrong on that.
A lot of things have changed hands
it's getting
over the
too
years.
Complicated,
yes,
right? We should put a flow chart up
yes,
here.
At one point, yes.
Okay.
But things change hands.
Right.
Everybody at one time used to work for somebody else.
Because they had a big operation down on Lakeshore Road by, is that Runnymede in that area?
Yeah.
Lakeshore and Windermere, somewhere in that area?
Yeah.
National Grocers did back in the day.
I believe they were owned by Sobeys at that time.
Right. Out of Quebec as well,
yes.
right?
Yeah. So everything, we're all interconnected. We all change hands at some point.
Awesome. But it's all mainly because of the meat. I remember that. That I really remember. Right. So you were in Oshawa, brand new to Oshawa.
Brand new to Oshawa.
Now, were you living in Oshawa? Did you decide to move there?
We moved to Curtis. We purchased a home in Curtis.
And sorry, you said this is 2005?
2005.
Okay, so the kids are starting to grow up a bit.
Yeah, our oldest just finished university, and she moved to Brampton, and she worked at Brampton General Hospital. She was a nurse. Her fiance at the time, which is now her husband, was also going to Guelph for veterinarian.
Oh, okay.
So our youngest was in grade 10, so she did grade 10 and finished off school there, and then she went off to Guelph to university.
Which is a perfect time in kids' lives when they just want to be moved around. Like, please move me away from all my friends and everything, right?
Yes, it was a little traumatic at the first, but we survived.
No kidding. We're going to talk about the pandemic and present days, but I just wanted to continue on this a little bit because you then ended up in a town called Port Perry, which you had never heard of, correct?
No, never heard of it. So it's funny. We were in the Oshawa location for 3 years, and I get a phone call saying that the store is being purchased back by Loblaws to flip it over to No Frills, and I'm going
because there's a Walmart opening.
Because there's a Walmart opening, a newer, bigger Walmart.
Right.
And Christy and I were devastated because we just realized we just got settled, we got friends, we got family, and we're being told we're moving.
To God knows where.
So I remember my first attempt to come up to Port Perry. We literally got lost, and then we started driving around, and we knew we had to relocate here.
Right.
So we knew the transaction wasn't going to take place until early fall. So that entire summer, we drove every single neighborhood, and I'm surprised no one called the police on us because we literally were stalking every household. So the opportunity came for us to sell our location in Oshawa and to repurchase the location in Port Perry, and we actually did that very quickly. But the funny side story is when we were getting a real estate agent, real estate asked, "Why are we moving to Port Perry?" And we informed her it was a job opportunity. She says, "Oh, they're the new owners of the Independent Grocers." And at that point, we realized how small Port Perry was, that we had not met anybody, we have not told anybody, and they already knew we are the new owners of the Independent Grocers in Port Perry.
And here you are. I'm going to stop you there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the pandemic, the way the situation has evolved in the last few years. So please stay tuned. We'll be back right after these messages.
PP Print is excited to offer Port Perry wearables featuring 2 great designs. Show your Skewgog pride with apparel and headwear. We have you covered. PP Print, more than just print.
At Voss, your independent grocer, it's all about hometown living and shopping. Owned and operated by Port Perry's own Terry and Christine Voss, the independent grocer carries many local items to support our town and its residents.
Welcome back. My guest today is Terry Voss, the owner of Voss Independent Grocer in Port Perry. Terry, welcome back.
Thank you.
So we got some interesting information about you growing up in the food business, in the grocery business, which I find very interesting. So you ended up in Port Perry. Now, was there a big lag between selling your house, vacating your store in Oshawa, buying a new house, and moving into the new store?
No, we actually found a home, I believe it was around October.
Okay.
And we were trying to sell ours in Curtis at the time. And just luck have it, somebody wanted a quick closing date. The house in Port was able to be empty, and December 1st, we were up here on my first snowy day in Port Perry and realized you get a lot more snow here than you do to the south.
Absolutely. And I won't ask if you like Port Perry because it's been, 12 years or so and you're still here?
Oh, yes, I love Port Perry.
So you opened a store in 2008. Family values is very important.
Yes.
And you started a campaign of hiring people who have some sort of ability issues, correct?
I have been doing that since I was in the restaurant business, working with different agencies to hire individuals that have intellectual disability or other barriers that may prevent them from getting part-time or full-time employment.
Right.
So coming up here, we just dove right into it. I made relationships with Community Living North Durham.
But you were on their board too, right?
I was on their board
That's right.
for several years. But before that, I was already hiring individuals that would have disabilities. I had the Ministry of Social Service visit our store and talk to some of the individuals that worked for me at the time. I've been part of the Odin board for several years also.
I don't know what that is.
Ontario Disability.
Okay.
It's one of the boards for encouraging employers to hire those with intellectual disabilities. I've done a few introductions to people to work with those that have disabilities and say that we have opportunities to hire those. And it was an untapped labor force. And at the time, it worked very, very well for us.
Right. It's still working well for you.
Yes, it does.
That's great. That's awesome. And I understand that that's a model that Loblaws is now rolling out to other stores as well, right?
It was funny. One of my first meetings with the Odin board was one of my co-workers from the Loblaws head office in labor relations was on that board also, and we didn't even realize, we didn't put the connection together.
Is
when
that
the
right?
names popped up on the list that Loblaws actually had 2 representations on that board.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, is that a difficult thing to continue doing with other employees in that? Is the interaction good?
Interaction is amazing. And I'll tell you, I've been from unionized stores to non-unionized stores, and I've never had an issue. And I can tell you there's times when the individuals become so part of the team.
Right.
It is truly amazing. Like Chris is part of our team at the store right now, and he's totally engaged with all the social events the store has, especially the Christmas party,
Right.
and very well part of our team. And I'll tell you a quick story. I have a young man that had some severe disabilities, and the union was a little concerned about his disabilities. I assured them that there's nothing, this young man lives with this, it's great. But the funny thing is, he became part of the team so much that the gentleman he worked with on a regular basis in the dairy department would always have a Super Bowl party, and he was invited to it, and his father was invited to it, and he just became whole part of the team. So it's one of those things where introductions carry some long-term friendship.
So life was good. The store was running well. You
Yes.
got your house all set up.
Yep.
You've become pretty ingrained in Port Perry as a community member, and then we get the pandemic that sets in, and it changes everybody, but the grocery business more so, right? I mean,
Yes.
toilet paper, for example, the big item, and I still chuckle about that because I still have about 400 cases at home, but. So the pandemic hit. So initially, back in I guess in February, March of 2020, we were talking about it, but not much was happening until the 16th of March when the world shut down. So what did that mean for you?
Well, the funny thing is, I had not paid a whole lot of attention to it. I mean, it wasn't part of the Canadian or Ontario market. Yes, we
None of us
much.
did. None of us did.
So I had a meeting late that evening, and I go downstairs about 6:30 in the evening, and we are lined up around the corner. Everybody's got cartfuls of toilet paper. Had no idea what was going on.
Right.
We were calling people back into the store, and it was like that till we closed.
Yeah.
Then the next day, we were informed about the pandemic, and everything changed. We got into a deep sanitizing program of the store on an every 2-hour basis, and it was very evasive. Then trying to get sanitizer, I mean, our whole life just turned right around. We weren't doing groceries anymore. We were just working towards keeping customers and staff safe.
Right.
So my job just went from reaching out, trying to get sanitizer, trying to get cleaners, trying to get gloves, trying to get masks. It was just one of those things that we were just reaching out for materials to make sure that we were doing everything we were supposed to do by the health units and by all other government agencies.
And it was all unproven too, because nobody'd been through it before.
Yes.
So everybody's doing the best they possibly can, but nobody knows whether it's right or wrong, kind of thing, right? You just do as you do, the best to your ability.
Literally no directions. What would end up happening is we would get bits and pieces of information, and we would have to decipher how to implement these policies. So one of the first things, if everybody remembers, was sanitizing before entering a business and to 6 foot distance, right?
Right.
So we came up with a plan to give everybody a cart to keep that distance. Amazing number of people that didn't want to sanitize. I was like overwhelmed, and I will tell you, the most issues we had were not wearing masks. It was not wanting to sanitize or use a cart.
What would be the reason for not wanting to sanitize your hands?
I can go on and on and on. Everybody had a reason why they didn't want to use it, which caused problems with staff, because some staff were having some very, they were very stressed with what's going on.
You're asking them to be police now, right?
Exactly, enforcing, right?
Yeah.
So it got a little crazy for a while. I'll be the first one to admit it. It got crazy, having to have security in the store, having to have people at the door. People lash out, trying to explain to people that this is not my policy, this is what we're required to do by the health unit. And it was very difficult to explain to some people that it wasn't my rule, it was what we were required to do by regional health.
Right. So it went on. People were lined up outside your store. I remember that very well. And you know, you work with it, you live with it. And after a few months, it becomes not the norm, but it becomes expected. And yes, you have to wear a mask. I get that, and so forth. But from a staffing perspective, now you obviously had staff that also fell victim to COVID.
Yes.
So that must have really put more stress on the whole work environment.
It did. Probably one of the worst thing is one of our young clerks got COVID very early along with this. Was not contracted through the store, was not contracted through the business. Father worked in Toronto area, and he contracted it, got in the household.
Right.
And it was terrible because we were trying to explain to our staff that, you know, it's still a safe place to work. This person has not worked in this place.
Right.
People that were in contact were isolated by the health unit and by our business. And we did everything we can to make sure everybody was safe and our community was safe. And we went above and beyond to make sure. I mean, staff never lost money or pay. If you worked with this person, you were home and you still got your paid shifts. Right.
Wonderful. You also, I imagine, there's a big expense involved in all this cleaning stuff that you have to buy, and all the labor that goes into all that. I won't ask you to relive the entire experience again, because I'm sure it caused you a few nights of stress, right?
Yes.
So fast forward a bit to a few months ago, when we as a nation have to pay back the government for all of this money and stuff that we were getting, and which starts with a thing called inflation. So prices are going up dramatically, and of course that's your fault. I'm sure everybody's blaming you for that. And although I still don't think you have anything to do with the price of gas, but how are people reacting to this in your store? There must be a lot of comments about it.
Yeah, there is a lot of feedback, especially in the grocery industry, and thinking that there's gouging going on in the marketplace. But in reality, the costs are all passed down. Mm-hmm. So when we look at fuel prices, labor costs, labor shortages, all of this has an effect on the marketplace. And it's just not Voss Independent Grocers in Port Perry, it's worldwide. So the effect does trickle down. So not only is the cost being reflected to the consumer, my costs have gone up.
Right.
So invoices for several hundred pieces used to be $1 figure, now it's almost doubled. Right. So everything has gone down.
So is Loblaws maintaining their same profit level, or are they also cutting into it? Because I'm assuming what happens is they have X number of dollars they have to have for their shareholders and to pay their dividends, and then anything that's on top of that gets bumped up so that they keep that bottom line the same, or have they also cut into their profits?
I don't think there has been any changes, but the habits of people shopping has changed.
Okay.
So the reality is that the profit line is going down because people are being more conscientious of what they're purchasing. They're buying more specials versus doing a full shop. So that does have the effect to the bottom line also.
So what do you think the future holds for the grocery industry for the next couple of years? Do you see it being as is? I mean, obviously it's dependent on inflation being what it was, and if we do end up in a recession, it's going to be even worse. But aside from that, do you see it kind of vacillating along the same way it has been?
I see it continuing at least the way it is right now for at least another year.
Okay.
We have to get out of this inflation or possible recession, and then the whole market will readjust and correct itself. Consumers right now need food, but they also need to stretch that dollar as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So knowing that, we have to work with what's within our walls.
Right.
We are not a discount store, so we really have to work
Right.
towards giving the consumer more of what they need, and look at the quality, look at the variety, and look at the service level.
Yeah, and it speaks a lot. The quality speaks a lot. It's tough times for everybody. Yes. I mean, as you say, people need to eat, but they don't have the money to spend the way they used to, or they're concerned about it. The inflation or the interest rate keeps going up to try and curb spending, to try and keep inflation down. Yeah. It's one big circle, and I get that. Just to move away from that, I understand that you also do a cupcake cake on Canada Day every year, 4,500 cupcakes.
It has been going on since I started in Port Perry.
Right.
I got approached to get involved in Canada Day, and I suggested let's do a big cake. And I think the first 3 or 4 years we did a massive cake, which was very dirty for council members and our MP having to cut that poor cake up. Yep. So we went to cupcakes after that, and now we do cupcake cake. And we've been as high as 4,500 cupcakes going out.
It's amazing.
And it's just one of
they're
the things.
so good. You bake them all in the store, right?
Oh,
you
absolutely.
I'm
up at 3 o'clock in the morning baking cupcakes.
That's good to know. That's good to know. If I ever need cupcakes, I can call you. Listen, our time is up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And appreciate you being here. All the best with the next few years in the grocery business. I'm sure you'll get through it, you'll weather it, and you'll probably do a great job keeping everybody in Port Perry happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. Please join us every month to find out the story behind a person right here on Rogers TV.